Welcome to today's edition of the IntoTexas AI podcast. It's your look at AI news and trends impacting Texas. I'm your host, Shannon Belew. Let's get started. Today, we're talking about a major new research study out of the University of Texas at Austin, and it may shift what success looks like when organizations think about AI adoption. According to this research, the companies that are getting the greatest value from AI are not simply the companies deploying the most tools, and the employees who are creating the biggest impact from AI use are not necessarily the ones that we think of as having the most technical skill set, or the ones with the highest amount of usage of AI tools. Instead, the organizations seeing really meaningful gains are developing entirely new workplace behaviors around how humans collaborate with AI. And this is indicative of the bigger shift we're seeing in AI business conversations, I think, because, after several years of really intense investment in AI technology, many organizations are asking difficult questions now. Like, why are some teams dramatically improving productivity and innovation with AI while others are seeing limited results? And why are some employees becoming exponentially more effective while others barely change how they work? And why are some AI rollouts creating enthusiasm and excitement while others create confusion, frustration, and even resistance? Well, the answer may have less to do with the technology itself and much more to do with human behavior, organizational culture, and the way work is being redesigned around AI. So, today we're going to take a deeper look at all of those topics and the emerging research around high impact AI use. And this includes both the opportunities and some concerns that organizations need to understand. So, let's change the conversation and start with that new study conducted by researchers at the University of Texas at Austin. It was done in partnership with KPMG, and this is a finance tax consultancy. And they analyzed roughly 1.4 million real world workplace interactions that occurred at KPMG involving AI systems and their workforce over a period of about 8 months. Researchers examined how the employees actually used AI in the day-to-day work environments. So they weren't looking at hypothetical use cases, they weren't depending upon surveys to get the feedback from employees, but they were really truly studying workplace behavior. And what they found was really interesting. The highest performing AI users were not simply people using AI more frequently. They were people that were using AI differently inside the organization. And the study identified a small percentage of employees who consistently demonstrated what researchers are now describing as sophisticated AI behaviors. And those workers generated significantly greater business value from AI systems. So the key distinction was not technical expertise, but what they identified as behavioral sophistication of the user or the employee. And from the study, they identified that the best AI collaborators tended to frame problems more effectively. They continuously iterated with the tools, and they often would challenge the AI outputs. And they also tended to guide the reasoning process with the tool. And they integrated AI into broader workflows. And they, of course, used AI to support more complex thinking rather than just replacing it. And that's going to be a big distinction as well. So, all of this adds up to a really different model from the way that many organizations today are still approaching AI deployment and adoption. I mean, as we all know, so many companies are focused very heavily on the licenses themselves, the access to the tools, how to do prompt training with teams. And all too often, leadership is focused more on adoption metrics versus business outcomes. We talk about that a lot at IntoTexas. But this research from the University of Texas at Austin, it really suggests that successful AI implementation may ultimately depend far more on cognitive behavior, workflow design, sophisticated workflow design, organizational culture. That's going to be a big theme as we talk about this. And as always, leadership strategy. That's going to always be a crucial piece of the puzzle when you talk about successful AI adoption in the workplace. So this does really change the conversations that companies are having, or it should change the conversation. So let's talk a little bit about the difference between using AI and working with AI. So one of the most important ideas I think that emerged from this research is there's a big difference between just simply using AI and genuinely collaborating with the technology. Again, many employees today still use it primarily for quick tasks, such as summarizing documents, writing emails, generating drafts of research reports, or simply retrieving information. And look, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. I certainly use it in those ways, and there's value in all of it. But again, as we start to shift that conversation to talking about sophisticated AI use, well, we need to look at how those more sophisticated users are working with the technology. The study found that they tend to approach it like a collaborative reasoning system. So instead of asking AI for just a single answer to a question, they might instead repeatedly refine the prompts that they're using. They will ask AI to compare options. They request critiques and ask for feedback. They explore trade-offs and they even test assumptions. They combine AI outputs across multiple stages of work versus a single process. So in other words, these highly AI adaptive employees, we'll call them, they're using AI as part of a thinking process, not just an output generator. And that distinction may really become one of the defining workplace skill sets of the next decade, because as AI systems become more powerful, the organizations creating the most value may not be the ones with just the best AI models. They may be the ones that have the employees who know how best to orchestrate AI effectively. And that's really the shift that we're talking about. So there is other research pointing to the same conclusions. What's especially fascinating is that there are lots of other recent studies that are now reinforcing this broader idea. For example, Microsoft released a study where they looked at what they called frontier firms, and they found that these organizations that were seeing the strongest AI gains are redesigning work around human AI collaboration and not simply deploying AI software or as a tool, right? So again, it's back to that people AI focus. And according to this study from Microsoft, the highest performing organizations were increasingly shifting their employees toward more oversight of the tools, using judgment more frequently, better coordination and synthesis, and really importantly, more strategic decision making while letting AI handle more of the execution heavy tasks. So again, it's that collaboration between human and tool. Another study out of Harvard Business School, they found researchers that there were studying innovation teams who found that employees working collaboratively with AI tended to generate higher quality ideas, broader thinking, and even faster execution. Researchers in that case even suggested that organizations may need to start thinking about AI less as a tool and more as a teammate. I think that's fantastic, because when I looked at all of this research and I was thinking about it, that's what it felt like, is that we're moving away from thinking of AI as just another piece of technology or software, and we're now starting to treat it as one of our team members that we use to challenge ourselves, to brainstorm, and to create better work outputs. So I love that in this particular study, they alluded to the same thing. Similarly, MIT Sloan research also reached some conclusions where they said human plus AI combinations frequently outperformed either humans or AI working alone. So, especially in areas involving creativity, strategy, and more nuanced decision making. So, again, as you're looking at this research, that does not come as a surprise, in my opinion. But across all of it, we have to again go back to the one theme that keeps emerging, right? The future of work may not primarily be about replacing humans with AI. Instead, it's about redesigning how humans and AI work together. That's such a big distinction. And I don't think that we've really given enough time or space to think about that inside of organizations today. We've been, again, driving so quickly to just deploy the technology to try to understand what it means, focused on more of experiments and creativity versus outcomes. And so we're now at a point where all of this is starting to shift. But as with anything, while this points to some fantastic future opportunities, if we can get our employees, our teams to look at AI differently, we also have to always ask, is there a reason for concern? And there are some other studies out there that are starting to identify some, interesting and meaningful risks associated with heavy AI dependence. For example, Harvard Business Review tracked a series, I think it was of 4 studies over time, that found while AI improved short-term productivity, some workers later reported reduced motivation, a lower sense of ownership of the work or the project, and less engagement with tasks once AI assistance was removed. And I think these are important warning signs that perhaps some employees may begin, I think it was called outsourcing too much thinking to AI systems. So, again, as organizations may not yet fully understand the long-term cognitive consequences to humans of that shift, we do have to start considering it. And then there's another concern where workers may become overly confident in AI generated outputs without fully understanding the underlying reasoning or even challenging the output. And this is one that we have a lot of conversations around, where as we're shifting the way that we bring AI into organizations, and then how do we shift people's roles to accommodate for this new use of AI. We've always said, well, it's helping the human worker understand how to think strategically, to look at the information and then put it into context and spit it back out or iterate at a higher level that can then be used within the organization to match the business outcomes. And, essentially that's what we're always talking about, are the business outcomes we're driving toward. And I think what we see is that in some cases, we as employees tend to just accept the output, right? We say, oh, this is technology, this is sophisticated reasoning-based technology. And so what it spits out, we just accept versus challenge. And again, if you go back to, the study that we talked about from the University of Texas at Austin, that was one of the things that they found, that really sophisticated users of AI do better, right? They challenge the output. They also put guardrails around it. They help define what it is that they're looking for. So back to collaborating like it's a teammate versus just accepting whatever comes out as the truth. So anyway, if you think about that, it can be damaging to any organization, but just accepting those initial outcomes without challenging it is particularly dangerous to me in industries where judgment and expertise matter deeply and it can have serious consequences. I mean, think about in terms of healthcare, engineering and infrastructure, right? Legal services, because there are real outcomes that can be influenced by limited information. And sometimes that's what you're talking about. Is it really the output you're looking for if you haven't given it the proper guidance, not just the right prompts, but truly engaged with it in a sophisticated way? So think of it in terms of AI systems are becoming increasingly persuasive and increasingly fluent, but fluent does not always equal correct. And I think that's the guardrail that we need to put up and the warning flag that we need to always look for, right? So organizations are going to have to face a difficult balancing act. How do you encourage that sophisticated AI collaboration without creating the over-dependence of it, right? Preventing our teams from getting lazy, in essence. How do you accelerate productivity without weakening the critical thinking that we so need and depend on from our human workforce? These questions are going to become central to enterprise AI strategy. If they haven't already, you've got to start thinking about these things. And maybe this is the culture problem, right? Because another major theme that I think is emerging from this research is all around organizational culture in the workplace, right? Sophisticated AI use is requiring that experimentation, iteration, curiosity, and psychological safety. So employees have to feel comfortable in testing workflows and refining those outputs and questioning assumptions that the tool or the technology is making. And they also have to be comfortable occasionally failing. And that's not always an easy thing to feel comfortable with. So that goes back to that element of psychological safety that you as a leader have to create for your team. The organization's leaders have to create that psychological safety for failure as we experiment and try to better understand how to use AI in really smart, critical ways that match those business outcomes. Unfortunately, and I mean, I guess it's to be expected, right? Organizations, I think for the most part, are still operating in ways that discourage these behaviors. And look, this is probably not new for the era of AI, because I think this can be especially true in large enterprises that are typically built around hierarchy and predictability and risk avoidance. Whereas AI transformation often requires organizations to step out of those comfort zones, right? They need to rethink how work itself gets done and not just about automating processes. And sometimes the organization itself must get reorged. So I think some companies are discovering that their biggest AI barrier isn't technical infrastructure, it's organizational behavior. And we see so often employees fear, being replaceable, exposing skill gaps, and just the fear of making mistakes in public and, that are visible to executives and their leaders and even their peers. And at the same time, leaders are under so much pressure from boards and investors to demonstrate measurable AI progress quickly. And that pressure can lead to, frankly, what I consider shallow adoption strategies that are focused more on activity than effectiveness. So let's talk about the measurement trap. And I think this may become maybe one of the most misunderstood parts of AI implementation, because we know that organizations are often measuring AI adoption using dashboards, right? It's our crutch always. And they're tracking usage frequency of the tool, prompts, sessions, or general engagement levels. And, it's even been reported recently that a major consulting firm was measuring and rewarding the amount of time using or logging into AI tools, especially from their leadership, but not necessarily tracking the meaningful adoption and outcomes that it produced. And look, that consulting firm is certainly not alone. Many organizations, this is how they operate, and this is that fallback behavior that we know. But again, if we go back to the UT Austin research, it strongly suggests that raw activity is not the same as meaningful impact. And in fact, some reports have already shown employees quickly learning how to game AI usage metrics. And that creates a real danger when organizations incentivize performative AI behavior instead of high value AI collaboration that leads to genuine business outcomes. So employees might focus on appearing to be AI active rather than using AI thoughtfully. And that distinction truly matters. Sophisticated AI use is difficult to measure with simple productivity dashboards. So we're going to, again, as leaders, we have to reframe how we think about measuring success. And the real value to the organization, to the teams, to the employees, it often comes from better decisions, faster synthesis, and stronger strategic thinking, improved communication, and better redesigned workflows. Those are the outcomes that, again, right now they're harder to quantify, but they may ultimately, and I think they will ultimately, matter far more. So if you're a leader inside of an organization today, what does that mean for you? Well, again, I think one of the biggest implications of all of this research is that leadership teams have to rethink how they approach workforce development. Again, I think we're really talking about organizational behaviors. And so historically, if you think about it, companies often separated technical skills from leadership skills, right? They're considered two different buckets. Doesn't mean you can't be one with the other, but traditionally they're separated into two buckets when you think about them. And I think what we're seeing from this type of research and starting to be proven out in companies that are doing it well is that AI is going to increasingly blur those boundaries. Because those employees who are generating the greatest value from AI are the ones who are demonstrating systems thinking and communication skills, contextual judgment. That's a big one. And again, strategic reasoning and adaptability. I mean, that's critically important. But those are not purely technical capabilities, right? So they're organizational capabilities. And leaders, I think, have to increasingly build environments where employees learn not just how to use AI as a tool, but how to think effectively alongside these intelligent systems. And, that's going to naturally reshape how you hire, how you train, management and its function and role, team structures, and even career paths for our human team members. So, the most valuable employees in the AI era may not be what we've traditionally thought of as the technical experts. They may be the people who know how to integrate human judgment with AI capability and do it really effectively. So, what is the bigger shift that's happening? Well, again, what I personally find probably most interesting about this research is that it really is reframing the AI conversation away from technology alone, and it forces us to start thinking about human adaptation. I mean, we're already talking about business outcomes. We're seeing that shift in the conversation occur, but we're not yet really fully talking about what's underneath, what transpires between those 2 points of technology to outcome. And I think as AI tools continue to evolve, and they'll do so rapidly, we'll see those AI models improve. Capabilities are going to expand. But the organizations that really thrive may ultimately be the ones that not only know how to redesign workflows intelligently, but they preserve critical thinking. They champion it, right? They maintain human judgment, and they develop employees who become capable of this sophisticated AI collaboration. I think that's much more complex than simply deploying software. So we're moving from this, I think, initial concept of technology transformation to now workforce or workplace transformation. And again, going back to this, research from UT at Austin and KPMG. I mean, look, first of all, kudos to KPMG to open up their back end operations to really have this true look and dig into what's happening. I think that's fantastic that they were willing to do that, and hats off to the researchers at the university. But I think that this research is offering a more clear view into what high impact AI collaboration may actually look like inside of organizations. But it does also raise some difficult and important questions. What skills matter most in an AI-driven workplace? How do organizations measure meaningful AI impact? And how do companies avoid that shallow or performative AI adoption? And I think most importantly, how do leaders preserve human judgment while still embracing AI acceleration? These questions are quickly becoming central to business strategy. And organizations that are able to answer these questions effectively may gain a major competitive advantage in the years ahead. All right, that's it for today's episode of the IntoTexas AI podcast. Thank you again for joining me. And if you want more insights into how AI is shaping work and the workforce, then I invite you to continue listening, sharing, and of course, please subscribe. I'm Shannon Belew, and I'll see you next time.